to take. I'll wait a while to take attendance. You all hearing me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so I thought you did well on the discussion board. I gave most everyone, a lot of people, 3s and 4s, basically B's and C's and B's and A's, I mean, and the grades were good, and overall I thought your answers were good. I was curious from you guys as to what the effect of the ChatGPT answer is on you, how you did things. Yeah, I'm not gonna, I just need, I'm curious for how it's affecting how students work. Is anyone willing to talk about that question? No one? No one's brave? No brave ones? I'm not gonna hold it against you if you say you copied from it or something. Anyone?
Well, I was a little worried because my answers didn't exactly match what the AI thing was saying, so I was worried that I was going to be wrong.
Did you change what you said?
No, I didn't.
Interesting. Okay. I know some people based their answer on the thing. Is anyone willing to tell me whether it changed you or you just referred to the ChatGPT answer and based your answer on that, or any thoughts on that? Alessandro?
Yeah, like you said, I just used it as like a referral point just to see if I was on track, but it wasn't too far off from what I thought was correct.
Okay. All right. I noticed that the quality of the writing was a little bit stronger than it used to be. And I suspect that's because you were using, some people anyway, were using the model from the Chat GPT to oh, I don't have the video on, do I? What's going on with this thing? Okay, here. All right, yeah. We're using the Chat GPT to help them with their writing. Did people do that? It's okay. I mean, you know, I'm not gonna, I don't hold it against you. No, all right. Okay, well, think about it. If you want to email me privately about that, Syed, to everyone, yes. Yes, yes to what, Syed?
I used a model to
You use it as a model and then base it, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I assumed that it seemed to me, I noticed that a lot of students were writing better English than the classes normally do, which is not a bad thing. I mean, it's nice that it was helping. I think though, you don't learn to write that way, but I don't think you learn to write just by writing. That's also, I think, a fallacy that I've heard from people who teach, you know, like we sometimes get advice about how to teach writing from you know, experts at the college or elsewhere. And one of the things I've concluded about what they say is that they overrate I mean, it's good to practice writing, and I mean, everyone should, but I don't think that alone is enough. It's a necessary but not a sufficient condition. A sufficient condition is if you do something, then it works. So the sufficient condition is if you do something. The necessary condition is then it works. So I would say it's a necessary condition that, in other words, if you practice, in order to write well, you will be writing often, but I don't think it's a sufficient condition. It's one of multiple conditions to practice writing. And another one is to study how to write, and when I say that, I don't mean that you should just practice writing on, just writing as you write. I mean, that does help, but then you have to learn how to improve, and that I don't think you can learn that by doing alone. You have to get instruction and learn. So the question then is, how do you, I'm going to put on the whiteboard for a second. I haven't done that yet, I don't think. So how you learn. And the way you learn to write, I would say, is to read a couple of short books about how to write, and then base your practice on those books. And I think a very good book that I found useful, I read right after I graduated from college, I was probably 23 or so, is Strunk and White, Elements of Style, which you can get at any bookstore and Amazon or whatever. In fact, maybe I'll show you on Amazon. I'll change the screen share to this one. And so let me just show you Amazon, Strunk and White, Elements of Style. It's a hugely known book. It's been read by millions of people. And it was written originally by an English professor at Cornell. And then after he died, E.B. White, who is a very famous writer, I think he wrote children's books, among other things, if I'm not mistaken. I forget. He wrote for the New Yorker. He's a very, very well-known writer, and he took it over. He had been Strunk's student, and he took it over. And when he rewrote it, Strunk had written it. It was not well known, and because I guess because E.B. White was associated with it, it became really well known. And some English professors hate it. They say it's not right. It's too superficial. Other people live by it. The famous writer Zinsser, who also wrote a book on writing well. I can show you that one too. He says, and Zinsser says in On Writing Well that if you're a writer, you should read Strunk and White every year, not just once. You should read it every single year. You should reread it. That's how strongly Zinsser felt about it. And I think that's Zinsser's advice is probably good. Not that you need to read it every year, but if you read it once or twice and you think about the stuff he said, maybe refer to it occasionally, it won't hurt you. There's other books on writing. I mean, plenty of books, millions of books, but There's English Writing for Dummies is, I haven't read, but it's supposedly pretty good. It's probably a little more simpler, but Elements of Style is very, very easy to read. It's not difficult at all. And one of the things that he talks about, I alluded to in the email I sent last night, is the joining of two main clauses. This is a basic principle in English writing, and a lot of people have trouble with this. I saw a few people on the discussion board make this mistake. And if you familiarize yourself with what a clause is, I think you'll benefit, your writing will benefit significantly. So just to I'll get on the whiteboard for a second again. And the idea of a clause is that it's a phrase, a group of words with meaning that contains a verb. So a clause just means that there's a verb, and a verb is any action word like run, hit, think, cry, whatever. So if you look at a clause like this, I ate the salad. Okay, the verb is ate. Okay, the past of eat. And if you just write it like this, it's a main clause. Okay, a main clause doesn't follow a conjunction. A conjunction is a joining word that joins a clause to another part of the sentence, usually the main clause. So if you say something like, so that I ate the salad's the main clause. If you say something like, when I ate the salad, that's a subordinate clause or a dependent clause. So when I ate the salad cannot be a sentence. It's not a main clause. Only a main clause alone can be a sentence. A lot of sentences are just main clauses. I ate the salad. If a main clause could be even one word. If you say stop, that's a sentence. In the English imperative, there's no verb. So when you join two main clauses, there's no problem if you join a subordinate clause with a main clause, because the joining word is already part of the subordinate clause. It's built in. So when I ate the salad, I was on Instagram. Okay, so the main clause, I was on Instagram. The subordinate clause, when I ate the salad. That's a perfectly valid sentence. You'll notice that when a subordinate clause starts a sentence, you insert a comma at the end. You always do that. If it comes at the end, you don't necessarily insert a comma unless you want to emphasize that what it's saying is unimportant to the sentence. If it's essential to the sentence, then you don't insert a comma. And something like when I ate the salad is probably essential to the sentence. So you wouldn't, so you say, I was on Instagram when I ate the salad. So you don't insert a comma there, or just throw that out. And let's say you then want to add that you also ate the steak. So what some students do is just join that with a comma. I ate the salad. However, I also ate the steak. those of you who are vegetarians accept my apology for that. So basically, I forgot to put the D in salad, but. So basically, you can't do that. However, is what's called a conjunctive adverb, and it doesn't serve as a joining word for main clauses. You can use it in other ways to join clauses, but not to join two main clauses. So how do you join two main clauses in a sentence? When you have two main clauses in a sentence, it's called a compound sentence. The word compound sentence means there's two main clauses in it. So you can't, when you have a compound sentence, you need one of several ways to join the main clauses, and you always do it that way. One way would be to turn one of the main clauses into a subordinate clause. So you could say, I ate the salad when I ate when I sorry about that, when I ate the steak. Okay, I kind of got it skewed, but I ate the salad when I ate the steak. That's perfectly okay. They are joining a main clause with a subordinate clause. If you want to use two main clauses, then you need a different way to join them. Okay, let's get rid of all this stuff. There. Okay, so if you want to join the first way to join two main clauses is to use a comma followed by a what's called a coordinating conjunction, and it sounds like a lot, but it's not that hard to understand. A coordinating conjunction is also can be called a fanboys, and it's easy to remember because they're all baseball fans, all right, or football fans. The coordinating conjunctions, they'll watch the Super Bowl. So the fanboys are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. That's it. That's all the coordinating conjunctions. There are 7 of them. And they're easy to remember, and because you can just remember fanboys and think of the Super Bowl. And so basically, those are the words that are used in English to join two main clauses. So they need to follow a comma. A lot of writers forget the comma. It's correct to always put a comma in before the fanboys. A comma alone can't join two main clauses, but if you join them with a coordinating conjunction, so you could say, I ate the salad, comma, and I ate the steak. That's good. Okay, so the comma alone is wrong. That's called a comma splice sentence. It's a kind of run-on sentence. If you join the two. Now, one of the things a lot of students do, I don't see it that much in these discussion boards, but when I assign one-page papers, I often do see, is that a lot of people write really long sentences joined by, sometimes they could even be punctuated correctly, sometimes they're not, but they're really long sentences joined by either coordinating conjunctions or subordinate clauses or nothing. Sometimes they're run-on sentences, which just means that you've joined them without the correct, you've joined the main clauses without the correct punctuation. And that's bad. You don't want to have really long sentences. Okay, it's less of an issue when the assignment is shorter. I'm not sure of the reason, but I could probably find in the list of discussion board posts a few people who wrote really long sentences. So I ate the salad, I ate the steak, I went to school, and it's all joined by commas or nothing or correct punctuation or whatever. And you don't want to do that. All right. The average English sentence is about 15 words. So I would use that as a guide. I'm not saying all the sentences need to be 15 words, of course, but if you look at your writing and you're writing sentences that are 30 words, 40 words longer. I've had students write 60, 70 word sentences. You don't want to have that. All right. So if you see that, look at what you've written. And if you see that a sentence is more than 20 words, think about whether you can break it into 2 sentences. And one question you can ask is, are there 2 main clauses in the sentence? If there are, then you ask yourself, did I punctuate it right? Did I insert a comma and a fanboys after the first main clause to join the second main clause, or am I using subordinating conjunctions? The subordinating conjunctions are not easy to remember, like the fanboys, but they're words like when, where, because. Okay, so if I'm going to look online, there's a list, there's plenty of these lists of subordinating conjunctions. And there's more than you can remember off the top of your head. Let me see if I can find a list here. That's examples and exercises. Okay, so just to, so I'll just show you at least 20 of them. List of subordinating conjunctions. Ultimate list. Okay, that's what I want. All right, so let me show you the ultimate list, according to them, of subordinating conjunctions. So the ultimate list of subordinating conjunctions. Okay, so they have them broken down by function. I don't know if this is the ultimate list, but all right, so words like than, rather than, whether, they can be more than one word. As soon as, until, whenever, now that, though, although, even though. These are all examples of subordinating conjunctions. As much as, before, by the time, until, whenever, wherever, so that, that's a big one, so that, whatever, who. So those are all subordinating conjunctions. So those are joining words. And when you start a clause with a subordinating conjunction, it can't function as a sentence. Okay, so I'll finish up this discussion with that. The next discussion board we have, you should ask yourself, am I joining 2 main clauses with just a comma, or am I joining 2 main clauses without any punctuation, or is the sentence too long as it is? Have I written a 40-word sentence when I could have written 3 12-word sentences or whatever? All right, so are there any questions about this? Well, I'll inject some of these comments about the writing during the semester. And I recommend strongly, if you're at all planning to work in a, let's call it a knowledge-based field where you do have to write written reports. So if you want to be an accountant and you will be writing audit reports, or you're going to be a consultant and you're going to write consulting reports, or you want to work in the corporate world and you're going to have to write memos and communicate. You need to have good writing. All right. So basically, as far as the people I've known in my travels in the world, when I was in the corporate world, the writing was pretty strong, especially at Johnson and Johnson, but at Inco, there was a lot of checking. They checked my writing, everything I sent. And the same thing was true at J&J, that they put a lot of weight on writing. And the writing was pretty good. At J&J, they had a clearer model, and they would tell you that, you should write short things, that the memos weren't supposed to be longer than a page. At that time, we still used paper. They had a very clear model about how to write, which was basically that you say your main point up front, and then, you use the rest of it to prove your point. And that's always a good model for writing, that you give your thesis or your hypothesis or your main point, your headline. You start with the headline and then you prove it. And Zinsser will say the same thing. And the thing was to always be clear. And the memos weren't supposed to be more than a page, but then you could attach a report to the page, to the memo. So if you had a longer thing, that became an attachment. I think a general rule, and this is true, it was true at J&J, and it's true, I would say everywhere, that if you can't say something in a few words, you probably don't understand it well. Right. So I think one of the huge differences between college and the real world is that there's much more emphasis on the volume that you write in college, whereas in business, I think clarity and succinctness are important. Whereas in academia, like, proving your point and writing a lot and qualifying and so on. And basically, I think in business, if the company's any good, it may be changing now because political correctness is infecting all aspects of life at this point. But in a company that's really trying to get things done, people don't care about, your qualification of, this may not be true then and then. They want the main point. They want the main idea. And so you want to be brief. That's always very important with writing. So you want to be brief and you want to be clear. And, part of that, there's no formula to it, but I would say part of that is to not use the passive voice. In other words, you say, I ate the fish. You don't say, the fish was eaten by me. All right. You don't use the passive voice. You use the active voice. And all good writing, except scientific writing at times, uses the active voice, but not the passive voice. So if you're in the habit of using the passive voice, break yourself of that habit. Always ask yourself, am I putting the person who's doing the acting at the beginning of the sentence in English? Not all languages are different, of course, but in English, the actor should be at the beginning, and you should be talking about, subject, verb, object, the agent of action, the action, and then who they acted upon. In the passive voice, the object comes first, and in some languages, the word order is different, but I'm talking about English, and so basically, you always want to follow the formula of the active voice. There are times when the passive voice is appropriate. For example, if you don't know who the subject is, or you want to generalize across multiple subjects, then you might want to use the passive voice. But the general rule is to always use the active voice. All right. Okay, so let me know if there are any questions on the writing stuff. I hope I didn't bore you too much. I think it's important to learn some of this stuff and try to practice it when you do the remaining writing assignments. And I'll go over other things. There are plenty of other issues to talk about with the writing that I noticed in people's posts. So, but as I say, I thought the writing was better. And, I know many of you are ESL students, and it's fine to, rely on a model like that as you're learning English. So that's a way to learn, actually. But at the same time, you want to learn to do it on your own too. So you want to practice, short writing pieces. One thing you could do, I said in one of the first sessions, to read the newspaper, at least to glance at it. And there's been a lot going on in the world that I think is important enough that you should be following the news a little bit. I'm not a big fan of the media. I think they lie a lot, to be honest. I'm not sure how much, or if they don't lie, they're not capable of reporting accurately. I think there's real problems with the American media. But basically, you should be glancing at least every day at a real newspaper, not TV news, which is nonsense, but like a real newspaper like the Wall Street Journal, and just picking up on what some of the business headlines are. One of the big things lately is the Fed. The Fed is, I think, is it today, is going to make an announcement this week. In fact, I'm going to look that up. I think it's today. Okay, so you can watch it live at 2:30. I think I might turn it on myself. And Chair Powell is going to discuss whether he is tightening further or not. Like, everybody knows at this point. And if you think this subject is boring, consider that virtually everybody on Wall Street is going to be watching that meeting. And most top managements are going to be watching that meeting, and virtually anyone who invests more than a few $100,000 is going to be watching that meeting, because basically it's going to affect the stock returns and the market for the next year. So it's really, really important. And basically, what they're going to decide there is not so much whether they, or let me adjust this. Where's participants? Let's see here. Okay, somebody's thing is off. Okay, what they're going to discuss there is not so much I don't know who it was, is not so much whether there'll be a rate hike. Of course there will. They're going to raise interest rates either by 0.25 or 0.5, but they're also going to, they give like this commentary after the announcement, and what Powell says is going to have a huge effect on the markets. And so if he says, for example, that they're going to be tightening further, or we're still really worried about inflation, the markets could well tank. They could well fall. If he says we're going to be really aggressive, we're unhappy with inflation, we're going to keep raising rates indefinitely, something like that. On the other hand, if he says, well, we're satisfied with the decline in the inflation rate, there has been a decline, and we're gonna not tighten as much, then the markets will go up. Okay, and so, this is like really important. Now, I know most of you probably don't have a big investment portfolio at this point in your life. I know I didn't when I was in college, and I didn't until I started, putting away money in my 30s. And I was delayed a little because I went back for my PhD, but by the time I was 40, I was putting away a good amount of money. And it took me a long time to understand what the variables are. So I'm kind of giving you a leg up on that. But basically, the Fed largely drives all business activity. Monetary policy drives all business activity. And when they create too much money, there's inflation, and that's bad for stability. When they reduce the amount of money, and they've been doing that in the past year, then the economic activity contracts, it gets lesser, and the result is declining inflation because the economic activity contracts. And this is normal. There's nothing bad. People say, well, there are things bad about contracting the money supply, which is that people lose their jobs. But although people lose their jobs, it's also true that when they expand the money supply, they do it by reducing the real hourly wage. So over time, people's real hourly wage is lower because of the Fed. Okay, so it's a two-pronged thing. The wages are suppressed and unemployment is suppressed. They're both lower than they would be. And this is the law of supply and demand, basically. That if wages go down, demand for labor goes up. And, the result is big, because the reason is that wage growth used to be in real terms about 1% a year, maybe in the 20th century at times 2%. In the 19th century, 0.5 to 1.5. After this inflationary pure fiat currency policy, paper money policy was adopted in 1971 under Nixon, real wages stopped growing. And they've at times been as low as they were in the early 60s. And at other times they've gone up slightly, but they haven't risen substantially since 1970. And this is the downside of the paper money system. Nobody says this, so it's absolutely true. And so basically, what you're experiencing with inflation is a more extreme version of what was occurring for 40 years since 1980. They were able to suppress real wages without the visible inflation, and that was occurring. Now, when they put the money out there during COVID, before that, the money was being created and then used by Wall Street and corporate America for investment. Investors were getting access to the new money. What they then did subsequently is allowed everybody to get the money. It was more democratic because of COVID. So this democratic, benign motive led to the inflation because they're creating the money. And so workers now are seeing their paycheck unable to cover their basic expenses because of the more democratic approach to creating money. So I'm not saying that was wrong or right. I'm just saying that that's what happened. So basically, if you look at Enron, now we'll finally get to our real subject today. I think that this mindset is a direct corollary And the reason when I say this mindset, I'm talking about the Fed and the monetary creation. And basically what you should understand is that the organizational behavior that you witness in the Enron movie, you know, the huge emphasis on stock price at Enron, for example, the obsession with stock price, which contributed to their, they used to, in fact, they had the stock price on display in the lobby of the company at all times. So anytime you walked in, you knew exactly what the stock price was. And Skilling was obsessed with the stock price. And I think this kind of mindset is a direct result of the kind of paper money system that was adopted in the 20th century. And if you look at the history of it, and you can read the history of it in this really great book. Well, there's two books that are both really excellent. One is by a guy named McKay, and the book is entitled hold on. Okay, the book is entitled Popular Illusions. Oh, sorry, extraordinary popular delusions and the madness of crowds. It was written in the 19th century, and it's still a classic. And McKay talks about the Mississippi bubble and the Louisiana, the land in Louisiana that was subject to speculation in France, and the South Pacific bubble that was in England, and they both occurred within a few decades of the establishment of central banking. So basically, in America, there was the first large-scale speculation in New York was led by a guy named William Dewar, who was a crony of Alexander Hamilton, who is buried on Wall Street. Hamilton was one of the true progenitors of Wall Street, to be fair. And he made New York the financial capital of America, and eventually of the world. I mean, we can say that Hamilton gets a lot of the credit for that. He's co-founder of the Bank of New York, among other things, co-founder of the New York Post, and a number of other things. But basically, Dewar led that when they established the first central bank in the newly formed United States, the National Bank, the first bank of the United States, Dewar orchestrated this huge speculative frenzy in the stock of the first bank. So the first speculative frenzy in American capitalism revolved around the central bank in the first place. And you can easily see the connection. If you look, for example, at the Great Depression, the stock speculation that was followed by, I'm not saying it caused it, but it was followed by the Great Depression, was facilitated largely by the newly formed Federal Reserve Bank, which had been formed in 1913, helped fund World War I globally, and then resulted in a huge inflation in 1919 and 1920, which was then popped in 1920, and there was a depression double-digit unemployment, and so on. And then a monetary expansion during the 1920s, and that this was where they get the expression the Roaring Twenties from a century ago. That there was this huge inflation. Our 20s are a little bit different because we're actually in the bust period now, rather than the boom period. But the thing is that Roaring Twenties then led to the inflation wasn't anything like we subsequently experienced, but it led to a bubble in the stock market, which Hoover encouraged the Fed to end. And what they did instead, they ended it, but of course they caused the great stock market crash. But what it led to some bankruptcies among banks, and then the Great Depression. And in fact, they didn't know what they were doing. So, Milton Friedman pointed out decades ago that the Great Depression was largely caused by the Fed. And, the New York Times doesn't like that idea. They'll editorialize, or, Paul Krugman, who teaches at CUNY, he'll disagree with it. But I think the evidence is fairly clear that there was this huge bubble created by paper money, which in turn led to the Great Crash. There were no Great Depressions of the scope of the 1930s Great Depression before the Fed. There were depressions, but they were milder and localized. And, they talk about the depression of the 1870s and, other ones, but they were much more localized and milder. So basically what I'm saying is that this psychopathic behavior that we see in Enron was in part a product of the policies of the Federal Reserve Bank. That's what I'm saying, is that you can't substitute, you can't extricate, you can't separate how a society is functioning in terms of its monetary and other fiscal policies with the kind of personalities that people have. I think, so, our own society is riddled with narcissism and this kind of emphasis, how do we make money without working, and buy now, pay later, and borrow and not worry about it. And I was talking to my wife, who lived in Germany for a long time, and she told me that in Germany, if you prepay a mortgage, if you pay back a mortgage before the required date, they charge you a fee. In America, they don't. And in trying to understand the difference, the Germans worry about debt and they don't want to get out of debt, so they tend to pay back their loans quicker. In America, nobody cares about that, so there's probably very few people who prepay their mortgages, so the banks don't really care or charge for it because basically nobody does it. So that's the reason. All right, so this kind of mentality led directly to the I think the behavior you witnessed not only in Enron but in FTX. Is there anyone who wants to tell us a little bit about FTX and what's going on there? Or what went on there so far? Anybody? No? Okay. So basically, FTX is a current scandal that involves a lending, a market platform for trading cryptocurrency that was used all over the world. And much like Enron, the guy who ran it came from a very elite background. At Enron, almost everybody there, especially the traders, had gone to an Ivy League business school, especially Wharton. And FTX was founded by an MIT graduate. His girlfriend, who was also running it, Ellison, I think her name is, she had gone to Stanford, and they were known as being the children of these, especially him, this regulatory expert. His father is a lawyer, and he's this famous regulatory expert, and supposedly he had these great credentials. He could be trusted. He was ethical. He came from an elite background, and this actually was not a sign of a reason to be trusted, but rather a sign of a reason not to be trusted. And so basically the firm FTX used the money that people had deposited in their crypto trading account, and they took that and invested it in the private investment company that these people owned, that Bankman-Fried and Ellison owned. So basically, this is just simple fraud. And it bears some similarities to Enron beyond the kind of people involved. I think the scale of it is similar, and also that they brought down a lot of smaller investors who trusted them. They weren't American. They weren't allowed to do business here because of their reporting, but people around the world had invested with them and were duped by these elite MIT grads. All right, now in your answers to the discussion board, a lot of people talked about, didn't have a clear idea, I mean to say, of situation strength. Maybe I didn't talk about it last time. Situation strength means that the situation modifies personality. Using artificial intelligence, researchers found that situations can be described as positive versus negative, complex, typical, important, or humorous. Each can influence behavior and elicit various kinds of behavior. So perception of rules will influence how a person will respond. Strong cultures suppress some personality traits and elicit other ones, and so cause certain kinds of behaviors. I think Enron is a classic case of this, that in other words, the culture there of this irresponsible emphasis on creativity, on supposed performance that really had little substance, if you have a good idea that's worth $10 million, but if you do a good job, that's you're an idiot. That's I think a symptom of not only the culture of Enron, but I think it's a symptom that these kind of ideas get circulation and are believed by someone like Jeff Skilling, who came from the top consulting firm in America. In other words, McKinsey, the top, but one of three top. The competitors are the Boston Consulting Group and Bain and Company. And so McKinsey is a broader, there are a number of other well-known consulting firms, but I mean, for business strategy, there's none better than McKinsey. And so this highly elite background where he was promoted at a younger age than anybody else. And this led to the kind of stupidity that he advocated. I think this is a social phenomenon. It's not just characteristic of a few rogues, but rather it's a reflection of the social atmosphere. And I think in a society where the belief is that the way to make money, and I'm not saying it's a wrong belief, I think it's a true belief, is not through hard work, but through financial speculation, will lead directly to this type of behavior. So I'm not exempting myself from that. I'm part of it, to be honest. but a small part, obviously, but part of it, a tiny part, but a part of it. But basically, this is what the society has led to. Now, I think if you look at and there's also something related to it called to situations trade called trait activation theory. And trait activation theory holds that some situations activate certain traits. Jobs that encourage creativity will encourage openness. And differences in the endowment people have for openness will better predict desired behaviors in that type of in that type of atmosphere. So in other words, if you're in a company that values openness, so let's say you're in an ad agency and they care about creativity and you are naturally creative, that will make you even more creative. It will make you demonstrate your creativity, and creativity will be more visible in the assessment of performance behavior. And when I teach HR, I mean, that's exactly what I say about compensation. That, in other words, when you design a compensation policy, the dimensions that you use to evaluate compensation should be in part what it is that you want to elicit in your company. So, for example, if you're in an ad agency and you value openness and creativity, that should be a dimension that's actually rewarded in your compensation system. And so if you consciously design compensation to elicit the traits that you want to reward, then you're going to get the kind of people that you want to get. We've been talking about personality, and so I've talked so far about stuff like person fit theory, which involves a test to determine whether you fit in one of 160 occupational titles. As you wrote, there are 6 personality types: realistic, investigative, which means people who focus on thinking and organizing. Realistic means that you're like a mechanic. Artistic means that you're good at ambiguous activities or artistic. Social means that you're helping and developing others. Enterprising, you're good at attaining power and managing. And conventional, that you're rule regulated. I thought the best answer someone gave, I don't know if it was this class or the other class, that skilling was basically a combination of enterprising and conventional. And I think there's truth to that. We also talked about the Myers-Briggs type indicator, and recall there are four dimensions. Each one has 2 poles. And so the poles are extrovert versus introvert, intuitive versus sensing, which means how big picture or detailed, thinking versus feeling, how logic, do you do things do you think logically in sequences? Do you do things by gut feel? And lastly, judging or perceiving, do you see the big picture, or do you do you do things in a planned way, or do you do things in a spontaneous way? And we also talked about the Big 5, which is probably the most important personality measure, and the 5 dimensions again: neuroticism, extroversion, openness, agreeability, and conscientiousness. And you should know those definitions, the definitions of those things. There's also the dark triad, and your answers in the movie for the movie had a lot to do with it. And so Machiavellianism, manipulative political behavior, narcissism, self-love, psychopathy, lack of conscience. And I think everyone got I think was right that skilling, I think they did have, I think Lay did also, and I think he brought in a team, and you can see that there was a guy who worked there who left before all the corruption started, named Rick Kinder, who was very stable and honest. And he was a very good manager, and they didn't give him Skilling's job. They gave it to Skilling from outside rather than to Kinder from inside, and he quit. And he then went out and he got financing, and he founded a company, which is now Fortune, I think Fortune 200 or something, company called Kinder Morgan. It was an excellent oil pipeline company, and it's still in existence and it's functioning well. And that's what Enron could have been, a good company, but they preferred this flashy psychopathic stuff, and that's where it ended. That's where it led to. One thing I think it's also important to understand core self-evaluation, which is that people draw certain bottom line decisions about themselves. People with negative core self-evaluations tend to dislike themselves. High core self-evaluations, people can be annoying to others because their egos are too big. Maybe I sometimes did that to people. People with high core self-evaluation tend to be more adaptable, and they're able to deal with adversity and change better. Self-monitoring describes an individual's ability to adjust behavior to external situational factors, and it's related to adaptability and sensitivity. It's a part of emotional intelligence. Proactive personality, which is also part of the assignment. People with proactive personality have initiative, they take action, persevere, they have high levels of performance. And lastly, the last point I want to make, and I'm going to take attendance at the end today, trait activation theory, ability, I didn't talk about that. Ability is also important. We've been talking about personality. Both are important in life. I think if you look at the book, The Millionaire Next Door, which was written in the late 1990s, and it's about, what are millionaires, people who get $1 million in the bank, which is basically now, at that time was, I think, the top 4 or 5%. Now it's probably about the top 10% of the public eventually gets $1 million. What are they like? And one of the findings is that it was not IQ. Okay, it was not intelligence that leads to that. They had slightly above intelligence, but it wasn't extreme. But rather, what they tend to have is self-discipline. So, in other words, they save money, they put money in the bank. So anyone can be a millionaire, basically. Obviously, if you earn more, it's easier. But most people, if you read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I recommend also, a lot of people who earn high money are in debt because they spend more than they earn. My ex-wife was earning a great salary when we were married. She was a lawyer, but she spent, at that time she was making, in today's dollars, maybe $250,000, $300,000. She was spending $400,000. So basically she was spending always more than she had. And the result was she was always in debt, and she was always paying off credit cards. So you can avoid that no matter what your earnings level. So the idea is that you spend less than what you have, what you make, and you put away money. And that's how you become wealthy. Ability, though, is important for hiring employees. So it's been shown very clearly that when you hire people, people who have higher IQs tend to be better employees. So they tend to be more productive. And this has been shown throughout the personnel psychology literature. There's been a lot of research on this, and I know a lot of people don't like to hear that factoid, but it's true. So if you don't like it, you don't like the science. The science is not what we like. Science is what is, as it concerns what is. And so basically, general mental ability generally does play a role in most jobs. And rather amazingly, the test that's widely used in that area by companies is the Wonderlic. And it's only takes 12 minutes, and yet it's been validated across a wide range of jobs. Validated means that psychologists correlate the score on the test with job performance and is measured in any number of ways. It could be through supervisory ratings, or it could be through objective output like sales volume. And the IQ does correlate with job performance. In many jobs, physical abilities like trunk strength, if you go back and you read Taylor and the early scientific management literature, they were more concerned with that. Factory work of some kinds or some kinds of work do require physical strength. We'll talk more in the future about values. I want to take attendance. I'm going to wrap this up. We'll talk more in the future about values, but basically terminal values describe end states, while instrumental values emphasize methods or modes of behavior. Supposedly there are differences between or among the generations. So the baby boomers, people who were born from 46 to 64, who are gradually dying off and reaching retirement. I'm 68. I was born in 54. And so I'm sort of near retirement age, if not over it. Generation X between 65 and 80, millennials between 81 and 2000, and Generation Z, which is you guys, between 2001 and 2020. I guess a lot of you guys are either very late millennials or early Generation Z people. And supposedly each of these generations have differences. I think one big difference is your generation is much more influenced by social media than mine. And I think there have been sharp economic changes. I think that you've never seen a more rigorous kind of economy, not based on paper money. So you tend to see wealth more as something that you can get without working. I think that those kind of things, it's not because of you, it's just because what's been around, what the society that my generation earlier have created leads to that. And of course, sooner or later, these things have a way of unraveling. I don't know what it'll be, but I don't think there are huge differences in personality. I don't believe in that kind of thing. I think humanity is kind of eternal, and people have the same patterns no matter when you look. Maybe they change to some degree. I think if anything, society now is more sensitive and morally developed than it was long ago, I would say. Anyway, so for the rest of today, if I can find the attendance sheet, I will. Got it wrong. Hopefully this is the attendance sheet. Okay. Here we go. I'm going to take attendance now when I call your name. And I apologize for the late. It won't happen again. I don't know what happened there. I just forgot to put the Zoom thing when I sent the email around. Okay. Syed Abbas.
Here, Professor.
Thank you. And you're free to go after I call your name because we're almost at the end. Syed Ahmed. Syed Ahmed. Samima Akhtar.
Here, Professor.
Have a good day, Samima. Alessandro Alessi.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. David Batesh.
Yeah, I'm here, Professor.
Okay, have a good day, sir.
You too.
Anam Bahati.
I'm here, Professor.
Thank you, Anam. Take care. Melissa Calixto.
Here.
Thank you. Have a good one. Winston Chan. Winston? Okay, Bin Chen. Bin. Kai Chen,
I'm here
thank you. Have a good one.
too.
Jirui Deng,
Here.
thank you. Have a good one. Farhan Aram,
Here, have a good day, Professor.
thank you. You too. Brianna Faustin.
Here.
Thank you, Brianna. Take care. Steve Feng.
Here.
Thank you, Steve. Be well. Jonathan Gonzalez. Jonathan. Minhao Hu.
Here.
Thank you, Minghao. Angelica. I know Angelica's here.
Here.
Thank you, Angelica. Be well. Jian Lin.
Here.
Thank you. Be well. Leon Liu.
Here, Professor.
Thank you, Leon. Take care. Elizabeth Maddox.
I'm here. Good morning,
Thank
Professor.
you, Elizabeth. Take care. Jinrang Mei. Jingrang. Rochelle Mendez.
Here.
Thank you, Rochelle. Take care. Demi Mullings.
Here.
Thank you, Demi. Take care. Cameron Nahar.
I'm here.
Thank you, Cameron. Take care. Nicholas Neglia.
Here, have a good one.
You too. Aquino Olivier.
I'm here.
Thank you. Take care. Chenille Powell.
Here.
Thank you. Take care. Jenny Perfecto.
I'm here.
Thanks, Jenny. Be well. Anna Siddiqui.
I'm here. Have a good day, Professor.
Thank you. You too, Anna. Winjin Turabov.
Here.
Thanks, Winjin. Good to see you again. Jaron Walls. Jaron. Yi Wen Wu. Yi Wen.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Gotcha. Take care. Kristen Yip.
Hi, good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
Have a
Be
good one.
well. And Anita Zhao.
Here, Professor.
Thanks, Anita. Be well. Okay, so let me read off people who did not answer the first time. If you are here, please let me know. Syed Ahmad, Winston Chan, Kai Chen, Jonathan Gonzalez, Jingrang Mei, and Jaron Walls. Are any of those people here?
Professor, you didn't say my name.
June Grant. Oh, I don't know. I had you mark presents. I don't know what's wrong.
Oh,
Okay, well, I must have.
Yeah.
No problem.
have a good day.
You too. Take care. All right. Jonathan? Jonathan, are you there? All right. All right. That's the end of the class.